We always think about what makes a business successful, right? It's usually about profit, the bottom line. But what if the real secret to winning today isn't just about making money, but about having a purpose? From these huge global companies to your local university, everyone's facing this new, really complex challenge. How do you succeed while also, doing some good in the world? Today, we're going to break down this responsibility equation and figure out where you fit into the whole picture. I mean, think about it. We're living in a global marketplace that is more connected, more crowded, and more competitive than at any other point in history. You've got corporate giants, top universities, everybody is scrambling for an edge. The pressure to grow, to innovate, to expand, it's just relentless. And it's forcing everyone to completely rethink what success even means anymore. So that brings us right to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? The one that every leader, manager, and strategist is trying to crack. In a world this fierce, how do you actually get ahead? Is it just about being the cheapest, the absolute best, the fastest? Or is there something more to it? Okay, so to really get a handle on this new battlefield, we first need to look back at the classic rules of the game. For decades, a few key principles have really defined what it means to have a competitive advantage. These are the foundations of pretty much any successful organization you can think of. And here they are, the big four. You've got efficiency, which is all about doing more with less. Then there's quality, delivering a product or service that's just superior. After that comes innovation, creating new and better ways of doing things. And finally, customer responsiveness, which is just about giving people exactly what they want. If you can master these, you're in the game. All right, let's make this real. Let's look at a concrete example. The rivalry between the delivery giants UPS and FedEx is just a perfect way to see this relentless drive for an edge in action. I mean, they both want to get your package to your door, but how they go about it reveals two totally different philosophies. And here's where it gets really interesting. Both companies are absolutely laser-focused on making their employees efficient, but they go about it in completely different ways. UPS creates this employee-owner culture with stock rewards, so their unionized workers feel like they have a real stake in the company's success. FedEx, on the other hand, is all about entrepreneurial empowerment. They basically tell their employees, hey, you see a problem, you solve it. You don't need a supervisor's permission. And this quote, this just perfectly captures UPS's obsession with efficiency and innovation. It's not just some quirky rule. It's the result of this incredibly complex route planning software they developed called Orion. The system crunches all the data, traffic, routes, you name it, to eliminate inefficient moves, like sitting in the middle of an intersection waiting to turn left. And the payoff? It's huge. By cutting out those left turns and optimizing every single route, UPS saves about 1.5 million gallons of fuel a year. Now here's the kicker. That single innovation translates into a $50 million saving every single year. Now that's what a competitive advantage looks like. So, the UPS strategy is a masterclass in how efficiency can drive profits. No doubt about it. But what happens when your product isn't a package? What happens when it's something like an education? How do these same pressures for efficiency and growth start to affect organizations that have a mission that goes beyond the bottom line? All right, let's shift gears now and jump into the world of academia, because universities today are facing a completely new reality. And in a lot of ways, it looks a lot like the corporate world. They're competing for students, for funding, for global recognition, all while trying to stick to their core educational mission. This tension has actually created a whole new concept, university social responsibility, or USR. You can think of it as the academic world's version of corporate social responsibility. It's all about that tricky balancing act, chasing commercial goals, like bringing in more international students, while still fulfilling their duty to society as a whole. And believe me, the pressure to act like a business is coming from all sides. Public funding is drying up, so universities have to find new ways to make money. That leads to a big push for international students who usually pay higher tuition. And of course, there's the mad dash to adopt new technologies to compete in the online world. They're being forced to operate more and more like companies. And this is where things get really complicated. When a university from, say, the Northern Hemisphere partners up with one from the South, their goals can be worlds apart. The Northern school might be focused on revenue and recruiting more students, but the Southern school is often trying to build up its own research programs and, this is crucial, stop its smartest students from leaving the country for good, something we call brain drain. So we've seen how companies and universities are both wrestling with this whole profit versus purpose equation. But there's a third, absolutely essential player in the system that we haven't really touched on yet. And that's you, the consumer, the student, the customer. Yeah, companies pour millions and millions of dollars into corporate social responsibility, or CSR. They do it because they think it'll make us choose their products. They splash their ethical practices all over their ads to win our loyalty. But is it actually working? What we really do when we're standing at the checkout counter tells a much more complicated story. To get this, let's do a quick walkthrough of how we all make buying decisions. It all starts when we recognize we need something. Then we hunt for information, we weigh our options, and then, boom, we make the purchase. But it doesn't stop there. We use the product, we decide if we like it, and eventually we get rid of it. The big question is, where in this whole process does doing the right thing actually come into play? And this leads us to the central puzzle of what we call ethical consumerism, the intention-action gap. Seriously, study after study shows that if you ask people, do you want to buy from responsible companies? They'll give you a big yes. But then, when you actually look at their shopping carts, that noble intention just seems to vanish into thin air. So why? Why does this happen? Why do our good intentions so often fall flat when it's time to actually open our wallets? Well, the research points to a bunch of specific psychological and practical roadblocks that get in our way at every single step of that buying process. The barriers are actually pretty complex. Right at the beginning, when we first decide we need something, the idea of sustainability might not even register. Then, when we're comparing products, things like price, taste, and just plain old convenience often scream a lot louder than ethical concerns. And even if we get all the way to the checkout with the best intentions, a last-second impulse can derail the whole thing. The data also shows some really interesting splits. For instance, when you ask people about their desire to buy from responsible companies, so this is before they've bought anything, women consistently say they care more about it than men do. They go into the process with more concern. But here's a real twist. When you ask people if they'd actually pay more for a responsible product, the youngest group of consumers, the 18 to 35-year-olds, are the least willing to do it. And this is the generation that we often think of as being the most socially conscious, but they turn out to be the most sensitive to price when it comes to these products. So let's just sum up what this data is telling us. Women say they're more concerned before the purchase, but at the cash register, their actual buying habits aren't all that different from men's. And that younger crowd, despite what they might say, is the least likely to put their money where their mouth is. They prioritize things like price above all else. That intention-action gap is very, very real. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've looked at the intense pressure on companies to be hyper-efficient. We've seen the struggle that universities have balancing their mission with the market. And we've looked at the complex, often contradictory behavior of us, the consumers. It all ties back to this modern equation of responsibility. And this leaves us with one last massive question. In this incredibly interconnected system of companies, universities, and consumers, who really holds the power to drive change? Is it the companies that need to innovate responsibly? Is it the institutions that have to educate ethically? Or is it us, the consumers, whose choices, even if they're inconsistent, ultimately decide who wins and who loses in the marketplace? Who is ultimately responsible?